Welcome back to another great episode of Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, I'm your host, Dr. J, broadcasting from the City of Angels, or City of Demons, as I like to say, or Hollyweird, or La La Land, or whatever else you want to call it, folks. And today we are broadcasting on UPRN, which is 107.7 FM. New Orleans, Louisiana, if you are tuning in via terrestrial radio, along with iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Deprogrammed Radio in the UK, plus all these other terrestrial places, or other networks like Deprogrammed in the UK that has terrestrial stations in London and Leeds. Even those people in Hong Kong are tuning into this show. But remember, folks, that the YouTube, my YouTube, the Dr. J Radio Live YouTube chat is the only one I am watching for your questions. And I do watch it all the time. You'll see me occasionally pop in there to say something, but usually I'm doing 5 things at once, so I can't really respond to everybody's comment. But if you could please write your questions in caps, then I will definitely be sure to pass them on to the guest. So, I'm hoping you all had a good chance to check out who our guest is tonight. It's actually, I found out something more just from speaking with him on top of what I read about him. That's going to make it even more exciting because we get to talk about something that I've always wanted to talk about. So, without further ado, he was in the chat yesterday as S4, which is perfect for, obviously what you guys were talking about, or what I was talking about, Bob Lazar, S4, Section 4, and Area 51. So without further ado, Mr. Eric Cooper, welcome to the show.
How you doing, Dr. J?
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm really excited to talk to you. And I remember that one thing you mentioned in the chat yesterday was that you mentioned that you had a sighting in Iraq. And I said, that's definitely something I wanted to hear from you. And that was one thing we'd hear today. But let me back this everything up. How did you get involved into paranormal in general?
Oh, God. So that's a story in itself. Going back to childhood, I was never into the paranormal. I could take it or leave it. I had a rather, when it comes to the paranormal side, a boring childhood. I lived on a farm. I lived in the mountains. I mean, think about that for a second. I had cows. I remember watching a UFO documentary or two at the age of 7 or 8, maybe 11. 12, but I could take it or leave it. Like, yeah, there might be something out there, but who cares? Matchbox cars. There we go. So 1989, I joined the Army. My first duty station was Stuttgart, Germany.
And 1990 or 99?
Yep, 1990.
Okay, so we're talking about pre-Soviet Union collapse.
Oh, yeah. So I was in 11th Armored Cavalry on the border in a town called Bad Hersfeld, and the whole mission of the Black Horse was to watch the border, was to watch the wall between East and West Germany. Now, I got there probably about a year after the collapse of the wall, but we were still doing border runs with tanks and whatnot.
And I know Vladimir Putin was still on the other side with the Stasi. I mean, disguising as a Stasi agent when we know he was a KGB, even in the era you were talking about, that 1990, he was definitely there still.
Right. But I was a combat medic. I wasn't into the... My job was to patch people up. My job wasn't to ride in tanks or, anything... When it came to the fighting aspect. I mean, medics will fight if they have to, but our mission is to save, even if it's the enemy. But, and so I was in Desert Storm actually in 91 with the Black Horse. I was in Somalia in 93 with the 514th Ambulance Company. And like everybody in my unit, we all got out after Somalia because Somalia was hell.
Yeah.
Pure and simple.
Just like the movie Black Hawk Down portrays that terrible accident.
It took me 3 years to watch Black Hawk Down.
Ah, yeah, because you had the actual memories of what you were doing.
Oh yeah. And we were there. We were the first medical unit in country. We were there in January of '93, and it was like Black Hawk Down, very similar right from the beginning. It wasn't, it just everything went south. After we left, everything went south. But we were getting mortared. We were getting rocket attacks. We were getting shot at. We were getting grenades thrown at us. We had booby traps set for sniper fire and whatnot. And driving an ambulance, that Red Cross doesn't mean anything when it comes to asymmetrical warfare. It doesn't matter. It's a target. So we had bullet holes in ambulances. But then I went to Iraq 04 through 06 with a signal unit. But at that time, I was a truck mechanic because I got out in 94 and I went back in January of 95 and I couldn't be a medic anymore. They had me switch MOSs, which is military occupational specialty. So I had to switch my job and I became a truck mechanic. But every unit I went into from that point, they found out I was a prior medic and I became a medic as well as a truck mechanic. It's unique how that works in the military, but that's how it works. But, okay, so 1990. So I was studying paganism. Now, as pagans, what non-pagans see as paranormal, we see as normal. Because if you're familiar with paganism, we work with spirits as part of our belief system. We work with fairies and fae as part of our belief system. Well, when you work with deities, it's energy. It's part of our belief system, but some of those aspects are seen as paranormal. Now, when it comes to aliens and UFOs, that's not so much part of our belief system, but it's reality, so it's part of what my team does.
Well, at the same time, though, you could say these days, I never once clumped them together. I thought, okay, UFOs, aliens over here, and then paranormal ghost spirits over there. I never once thought there was a crossover, literally until a handful of years ago.
Right. And it gets irritating because what I consider paranormal is alien, UFO, Bigfoot, cryptids, and the spirit haunting side.
Yes.
They're all paranormal. And I've always thought of it that way. So when I was sending out promos for Forest Moon Paranormal, it would go in UFO groups, paranormal groups, haunting groups. It go to all of them, and I catch flack for it. Well, why are you talking about aliens in our group? Because we're a paranormal group. Well, aliens and UFOs are paranormal.
True.
And you catch a lot of hatred for that. I mean, and it's sad because the paranormal field should be unified. It shouldn't be, there's no such thing as aliens, but I believe in the spirit. Really? How can you believe in one without the other? And you'll find a lot of cases that we do actually have both aspects involved. There will be spirit activity and an alien abduction in the same house. Are they combined? I don't think so. I think there's just more going on. But 1990, so I was involved in a car wreck on the Autobahn in 91, and I should have been dead. We were sideswiped by another German car. It was 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was actually transferring from Stuttgart to Bad Hersfeld at that time from 1st 16th Infantry to 3rd 11th Armored Cavalry. And on our way back to have fun for the weekend, we got hit. I jumped out of the car, went to check on the Germans because they were broadside. And all I remember is stepping away from the car and hearing tires and metal, and I was laying in some woods. I was actually thrown 30 feet through the air.
Wow.
My tanker buddies saw me fly like a rag doll. My tennis shoes were still on the Autobahn. They thought I was dead until they heard me yelling for help. So I had a crystal in my pocket that a friend gave me before I even went to Germany that had a lot of magical energy put into it. And the reason I bring that up is because when they saw me fly, they saw a flash of light.
Oh.
The only thing I had on me, well, of course, my jacket, but the crystal was in my pocket. The crystal never left my pocket. It never fell out, nothing. So when you talk about a flash of light, it had to have been the crystal. So the only thing that happened to me was it tore the ligaments in my right knee. And you're talking 90-mile-an-hour impact that hit the car that threw me. So, yeah, I should have been dead. I probably should have been dead in Somalia, too. because I had sniper rounds that went within inches of my waist. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I probably was close to death and didn't realize it. But, so, getting to the time warp, because I happened in Bad Hersfeld, we also had a ghost that lived in our room that I named Fritz. He was a German soldier.
Mm-hmm.
And he was cool. And that's a funny story, too, because, so I named him Fritz. And I don't know where the name came from unless he just, popped into my head or something. But one of my cook buddies, we were getting ready to go out and go clubbing. And he sat on my bed. And I said, and I told him, we have a German ghost that lives in here. And I've never had a problem with my bed before this. And he laughed and he said, there's no such thing as ghosts. Well, my bed collapsed.
Huh. It's like the ghost responded right away.
Yep. And he looked at me and I said, you know what? I've never had a problem with my bed before. Now you done ticked him off now. And I fixed my bed real quick. He sat back on it. He kind of bounced to test it. And we're talking and he said, no, seriously, I don't believe in ghosts. And my bed collapsed again. I'm like, you know what? Let's just stop talking about Fritz. Fritz, you're cool. We're leaving now. And we left. But another time, ironically, another cook buddy of mine, we went clubbing. And so our base is on top of a hill. We're like within walking distance of downtown Bad Hersfeld. Love that town. We'll go back in a heartbeat to find the money. I have German friends there. Great little town. A lot of history in that town, as a matter of fact. So there's a building called the Ratskeller in all German villages. And it's kind of like what we would call a chamber of commerce here. It's the political center of the town. And it was probably around 10, 11 o'clock at night, pitch black, and we're walking down an alley, and the Ratskeller is right in front of us. And we're talking, before this time, but as we're walking, we didn't know it at the time because we didn't, talk about this until about 5 minutes after it happened. But both of our vision went black and white.
Ooh.
And in front of us appeared this 1920s limousine, and it had the Nazi flag on one side, the German flag on the other. And we didn't freak out. We didn't stop. I don't know what we were thinking, to be honest with you, when we saw it. But out of the building comes Hitler and his whole entourage.
Wow. With Goering and all of them in tow?
We weren't, but we weren't scared. And I really don't know if it was a time warp. I don't know what happened. I still can't explain it other than that's what happened. And they looked at us. And I don't know what they saw. They didn't freak out. They just, look, there's two guys walking in the alley. I don't know if they saw two USGIs in jeans and T-shirts, or if they saw us as German citizens. But we walked towards them. We took a left, went up the street, and our vision went back to normal. Everything disappeared. And we walked in silence for about 5 minutes. And he stopped. And he said, dude, did you just see something weird back there? And I looked at him and the reality probably sunk in, because this was back in 1992, this would have happened. And I looked at him and said, really? Did your vision go black and white and you just saw Hitler? He goes, yeah, the 1920s limousine. I'm like, whoa. So, what was it? What happened? I still don't know. Time warp? Could be, but it was a very unique experience.
I would say, this reminds me, I'm going to say this to the public right now because I don't think I've ever said this story until you told me that you had a time warp seeing Hitler right before we came on. And just for those of you who, you're going to hear this repeated, I'll make it quick. For those of you who are listening or in the chat, if you remember in the late 80s that Time Magazine was trying to release one of those book of months on unsolved mysteries, and I got the first copy, which I think is like $1 or something at the grocery store with dirt cheap, and then everything after that they try to sell you monthly. And in there was various mysteries from, Roswell, the Socorro, New Mexico landing, to Abraham Lincoln seeing the ghost of himself, or having a dream where he saw a coffin in the White House. He walked up and everyone was all somber, and they all said that he asked what happened. He said the president was assassinated, and then he woke up and sure enough, he's shot dead, within days or even the next day. But this one case, and I've never come across a case like this before, and this is what I told you, Eric, is that there was this gentleman that was walking around a country road in the late 1800s carrying, I don't know what the guns were at the time, a Winchester repeater, something like that, and he came across, on this country road. And all of a sudden, on the other side of the road, he saw somebody that was dressed in clothes even older than him. It seemed to be like the old 1700s with like a musket rifle. He looked at him, the guy looked at him, they both were in disbelief. And then just like that, the guy sort of, the way the book was describing it, I don't want to say he blinked out, disappeared, but when you look at a road in the heat, you know how you see that I don't know. The waves, yeah. That's what the guy ended up disappearing into. And that's the first and only time I've ever heard of a time warp. And I've always been on the lookout for them. But I told you earlier that I'm always weary about videos on YouTube about time warps and glitches because, it's hard to believe if it's just someone posting it without someone actually telling the story, and then even then you have to, dig a little further. But this right here, you and one friend saw it, so two of you, right?
Yep. It was me and AJ, a buddy of mine, and I'm still trying to find AJ. Just for clarification, because I know he remembers it. He's got to. That was a mind-blowing experience.
Oh yeah, I would think so. Absolutely, I would think so. So was this your outside of the ghost in the room where someone jinxed it and you had problems? Was this the first real encounter with paranormal outside of you being shot 30 feet away from your car at the Autobahn?
No. Because going back to Stuttgart, so I was I kind of became known as the metaphysical. It's kind of the metaphysical person to go to. And a buddy of mine went to Desert Storm before we went, and he wanted me to watch over his girlfriend. And she came to me one night and she said, "I don't know. I know you know about spirits and stuff, but I'm pregnant. I got drunk. I played with a Ouija board. Those things you don't mix."
Yeah.
And
pregnant, and drunk, and Ouija board. Wow.
Yeah. And Germans they don't. So Germans drink, smoke. It doesn't matter. The babies come out fine. I don't know. That it's a cultural thing. But she said, shortly after that, there was the garbage can would move in the kitchen. There was something rocking in the rocking chair. She just had a presence in the house, and she wanted me to come check it out. So, and so that's one of the criteria that. So within Forest Moon Paranormal, we actually have 3 tiers of priority, and we call it triage. The first tier is children and pregnant women. And I get asked, why do you worry about pregnant women? Well, being pregnant, for one, is stressful enough.
Yeah.
You throw the paranormal experiences in there, that's additional stress. Plus, you have entities that want to take the soul.
Of the baby, too, right? And also the stress can cause a miscarriage.
Right. So oftentimes what happened in the case in Germany, because I couldn't do anything, I wasn't a paranormal investigator back then. I was an experiencer. And so, eventually I couldn't do anything. The baby miscarried. Now, some would say, it's because she drank alcohol. No. Actually, because there was an entity involved, the entity took the baby's soul. I can guarantee that. But anyway, getting back to the tiers real quick. So tier 2 is any case that we have that has physical injury or a certain level of terror. On the team, we have 2 scientists. We have a psychiatric licensed therapist. We have our Astral team. We'll get to that later on in the show, though.
Yeah.
So in my first UFO encounter, though, was again in Germany. So I was in Germany from 1992. I went to Fort Lewis, 92 to 94. Went to Somalia, 95 to 98. I went back to Illesheim, Germany. And then I was in Kitzingen, Germany, again in 01 to 03. So my first and second UFO encounters were both in Kitzingen. No, Illesheim, Bad Windsheim, that's right. So what's interesting is my second encounter, was actually what you would call a CE5.
Ah, yes. You mean a close encounter of the fifth kind, meaning human-initiated contact.
Exactly. So my first encounter, I had to take a soldier to prison, to Mannheim. And it was midnight when we were coming back, because Mannheim was a good 3 hours from Illesheim. And we were coming back, and so have you heard of the alien war over Nuremberg that happened, I believe, was in the 1800s?
I think it was the 1500s. You mean where there's a painting and it has like all these balls and spheres and they were attacking each other? Oh, yes, absolutely. One of my favorite paintings, actually.
So Bad Windsheim is 45 minutes from Nuremberg. And we're coming back down the Autobahn. And somebody else is driving. I couldn't drive in Germany at that point, I don't think. If I remember right, it was a military vehicle. And I see a big orb. It looked like an orange basketball over Bad Windsheim. I'm looking at this thing, I'm like, that doesn't look like the moon. Well, wait a minute, the moon's over here on my right. So what is that? I've never seen a UFO before this, and I kind of shook the driver and said, "Do you see what I see?" And he looked at it and was like, "What is that?" Now, we watched it for about 5-10 minutes. It blinked off like you turn a light switch off. And it reminded me, years later, of the orbs in that woodcut from Nuremberg. So it was interesting. And about a year later, I'm on the porch of my housing in Bad Windsheim, and I saw something kind of made me want to grab a flashlight. And I grabbed a flashlight, and I saw this star. And I shone a flashlight at it. And it shot down to about airline level. So you figure, 1,000 foot, maybe 800 foot. And it hovered for about 5-10 minutes. And then it shot back up into. So there was no intelligent contact, nothing like that, other than I shone a flashlight at it and caused it to shoot down.
Yeah, well, but it responded to you, though, clearly, by using the flashlight. Right. And if you said something told you to grab a flashlight, it's almost as if you received a message of sorts, or, your intuition was strong enough to say, let me grab a flashlight and go outside, or look up.
Right. So, in the same apartment, so I had a chow chow. I'm telling you right now, chow chows are very psychic. That's probably, in my experience, one of the most phenomenal breeds when it comes to being intuitive. So I'm trying to remember timelines here. I think it was before I had that experience. It was shortly after. It would have been about 95, 96. But I felt a presence in the apartment, and I got this copper taste in my mouth, almost like you put a penny in your mouth. Like a metallic taste. And at the same time, so I'm in my kitchen. At the same time, the chow chow looked up at the ceiling, whimpered, and ran into the living room and sat down. All the while watching the ceiling for about 10 minutes. And at the same time, I've got this metallic taste in my mouth. I'm like, oh, here, And at this point in time, so I didn't get into the UFO abduction field until about 94. 94, I got thrown into it. I've never been abducted. I just know people who have. So I had a friend, and she woke up and she had a triangular puncture, a triangular pattern of puncture marks on the lower abdomen. Now, if you're familiar with the gray hybrid program, you'll know that's one of the first signs.
Oh, absolutely. I worked with Yvonne Smith for years. I was a presenter at CERO, which is her group for people who've had abductions. And she not only does hypnotic regression, she has a weekly meeting where she has basically, it's almost like a group therapy with people who have been taken against their will. And a lot of people show up to this, and I've been privy to be invited, even though it's supposed to be a closed group, to do my own research and to hear the stories. And when you said that triangular pattern of puncture wounds, the first thing that popped in my mind is, wow, it sounds like taken, definitely taken. Before we get too far, if you don't mind, there's already a couple questions popped up if you want to take them already. So let me go back to the first one here. Let me see, where was it? This is from Frankie Zomboy. He wants to know, what did the UFOs in Germany look like that you saw? I'm assuming one of them was the orb from the Nuremberg painting?
Yeah. Yep, that was the orange orb, and it looked just like a basketball. It was actually about the same size as what you would imagine the moon to be on a full moon night. But the full moon was on the right side of the Audubon, and the orb was on the left side over by Vinsheim.
Wow.
The second one was just like a star. And, I shone the flashlight at it. The star shot down. Stars don't do that.
No.
They do satellites.
No, they don't. Neither do satellites. Nor does the ISS spaceship. Nothing.
I laughed because, your guest last night was talking about satellites. They just kind of go about their business and go in a straight line. They don't do, 90-degree angles and then they go shooting across. No.
They don't change altitude. They don't, unless they're coming in for re-entry at the end of their lifespan. You're absolutely right. That's all they do. Cross from one part of the sky to the other in a straight line, and that's it. And if you ever see them coming down, it's because they're re-entering the Earth's atmosphere, and they're going to hit the ground, because their life is out.
Right. So, yeah, those are the two. Okay, so we'll get to it, but the one in Iraq was a triangular-shaped craft. Mm-hmm. Again, I ran a pagan group in Iraq, and two of the soldiers that were in our group were aircraft crew chiefs. The other one was an aircraft mechanic. And they were all witness to this as well. And even they, because I agree, it could have been an experimental craft, but it wasn't one of ours. And that was verified by,
This reminds me of the 80s Belgian case of the triangles that were appearing there, a lot in that era.
Right. This made no noise. It moved very slow. It wasn't a drone. I know drones quite well. We have a drone operator on our team, as a matter of fact. But back then, even the military drones, they made noise. If anything, a hum. And they're usually a higher elevation. They're high-altitude drones that we use in the military. But this wasn't. It was, and it moved slow. And even the aircraft personnel that were in our group said the light patterns weren't right. They weren't conventional craft light patterns. They were greens, they were blues, they were white, they were red. That's not normal for our kind of aircraft. And it showed up for about 3 or 4 nights in a row. So, going by that pattern, it very well could have been experimental craft. I'm not at all saying, it's alien, because I fully agree not all UFOs we see are alien. Or what we call off-world. We don't use the term alien so much as we do off-world. Some aliens are interdimensional. Some aliens are other planetary. Some of them originate from here.
Yeah, good point. So, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I would think that, a lot of people talk about USOs. Where I live, right here off the coast of LA, between Los Angeles Harbor and Catalina Island. there is just a history of craft going in and out of this little canal. I mean, we're talking maybe like
Yeah.
30, 40, not, it's not 100 miles, I could tell you that much, because the Catalina speedboat that takes you, it's like a, I don't want to consider it like a yacht, but it's large enough to hold a good size of passengers. I don't know, maybe 40, 50, something like that. It'll get you there in about 20, 30 minutes. So if you think in terms of that, it's really not that distant to get to Catalina Island. Yet in that area, people from as far north as Malibu to as south as San Pedro are always talking about craft going in and out of the water right there.
And and again, I was listening last night, so you're absolutely right. It's not a UFO until it leaves the water. It's a USO when it's under the water. And there were countless. There's always countless reports of underwater craft, underwater lights that aren't normal. And I love the movie The Abyss because that's a perfect example
Of having a base
of
at the
USO.
bottom. True.
Yeah, in the Mariana Trench. And we can't even get to the Mariana Trench other than with specialized, submersibles. So,
And that's just recently too, because the pressure would have, crushed anything,
exactly.
submarine from 30 years ago, if it had the capability of going deeper than anywhere clear to the Mariana Trench, it would be just crushed, let alone the people inside from the pressure.
So we on the team, I actually have an alien race specialist, and let me explain something. So on our team, we refer to each other as specialists, not experts. There's no such thing as an expert in this field. And so then I get arguments. Well, a specialist is an expert too. No, actually, an expert thinks they know everything there is to know about their specialty, and aren't willing to learn. A specialist only specializes in a certain area, but they're always learning.
Yes. Yes.
So we have a Bigfoot specialist. We have our alien race specialist. Our Bigfoot specialist specifically has been in his field for 35 years, and he's here locally. We are a global team in that we do Astral. So, and I know we're jumping around, but if you're okay with it, I'm okay with it.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And you know what? Let me ask you this real quick, because I don't want to get too far before we miss Lasha's question here, which is,
Okay.
I think she might have misheard the beginning of what you said, because she says, what is it that makes Mr. Cooper believe UFOs are not a spiritual experience? I believe you said they were, right?
I believe some of them are. You got to understand there are 2,500 races at last count. And I'm not talking human documentation. That this is going. So I've been in the alien race research side for about 6 years. That side's fairly new. The abduction and UFO field I've been in for about 28, since 94. And my math may be off, but since 94 I've been in the UFO and abduction side. The alien race side is fairly new to me as far as studying them specifically. So if you've heard of Dante Centauri, he came out with the Alien Races book.
Mm-hmm.
He translated it from Russian from the KGB, and so it's free download. He never charged for publishing or nothing. He didn't believe people should be paying for education, so it's free. It's actually in our group's library, as a matter of fact. But you can Google it, you can download it, and it's fairly accurate based on our assessment and our Keith Andrews, our alien race specialist assessment. And what's interesting, I don't believe everything I read. I read everything with a grain of sand anyway. And I tell our team, when it comes to research, we have too many Google researchers or too many Google experts out there. If you haven't been in the field, seen Bigfoot tracks, heard Bigfoot tree knocks, and all you go by is Google, you don't know anything about Bigfoot. You really don't. When it comes to, I like to have 5 independent, verifiable sources. 3 will work, but I prefer to have 5. The more the better. When it comes to our mediums, everybody thinks they're a medium. You have to vet them. And by vetting them, you throw them on a case blind. They don't know anything about it. And if they come back and they can tell you verifiable information such as the background and research of that location or what the client is telling you but hasn't told the medium, that's a very good way of vetting them. So I researched the ARB. I ran a lot of the information that was in the ARB was actually verifiable by the research I'd done, 20 years before. Because a lot of the races that he describes, he actually talks about that same race is what crashed in Venezuela, for example. And a lot of the races I ran out of that book by R. Keith, he would say, oh, wow, yeah, I know that race, but not by that name. Well, if humans saw it, and humans, caught that name, and he's the one talking to that race, of course it's going to be a different name or a different translation or whatever. So, yeah, there's 2,500 alien races. Some of them are here. Some of them want nothing to do with humans, and I don't blame them. There's only 16 documented that are actually abducting. And I'll get to that real briefly here. So some aliens, some of the abduction races, so we kind of went into the gray hybrid program. That's the ones, and actually what's different today versus back in the 90s, you'll find that some of the abductees today are actually giving natural childbirth here on Earth, and they're hybrids. And I know a couple cases specifically I won't go into because of confidentiality, but there is a hybrid. She doesn't know she's a hybrid, but her dad does. And so you got the gray hybrid program. You've got the scientists. So these are the alien races that basically are doing medical experiments, they're doing DNA and genetic experiments, they're studying our genetics. Most of your abductees have a family bloodline tie. So when you talk to an abductee, you'll ask them, were your parents ever describing UFOs or being taken, or were your grandparents ever described being taken or seeing UFOs, and you'll see a tie. Just walking down the street, if you've never been abducted, you probably won't be. A lot of people get scared by that. So that's the scientists. You've got the social scientists, and so anyone that wants to study abduction, I always recommend Dr. David Jacobs' Secret Life of Alien Abduction. That's the first book I picked up. A crash course, didn't know anything about abduction, and it answers everything.
He's one of my great dear friends, and you know what? I wish I could bring him back on air. He's now public with what's going on with him. He's starting to get the onset of dementia, and because every time I call him and every time someone else speaks to him, they have to explain where they remember him, and it's sad to know that at some point he's going to pass away, but he was able to be, when he was still intact, after even his wife passed away, to get out that last book, Walking Amongst Us. And you probably know about this, Eric, is that in the last 25, 30 years, abductees, well, first of all, let me back it up for a second. As every time a hybrid was made, right, and it looked definitely like a gray, the more humans that you have that keep breeding with these hybrids, eventually you're going to have a hybrid that looks more human than it looks, like a gray or whatever species they were mixing at the time. And Dr. Jacobs was doing studies with a lot of abductees who says they were on ships and they were seeing these baby hybrids or young hybrids, and they were shown settings like a grocery store. And they were told, okay, so what do you do in the store? The aliens were, the ones that were in the ship were telling them to explain it to the hybrids. Well, what do you do? What's this shopping cart thing? What are these jars? And, what's this cash register? And then they would show them a door and say, well, what's a key for? Things like that. And then like a scene in like a kitchen. Well, what's the microwave? Or they didn't call it a microwave. What's this for? And that to me is an inclination like, they were getting ready to prepare them to be placed here to walk amongst us where we wouldn't see one in a grocery store, looking around in shock like, what am I doing in here sort of thing. That really scared the heck out of me, and that's a lot about what his most recent book is, Walking Amongst Us.
Well, and there's been races walking amongst us for years, for hundreds of years. Have been races actually lived here, up on the mountains primarily. But yeah, and again, I think within the last 10 years is when you started seeing a natural childbirth of hybrids. Now, the interesting difference too with abductions today is they're using the hybrids to do the abducting, the alien hybrids. Not so much the human-looking hybrids you see here that walk among us. But what's different, back in the 90s, the Greys that were doing the abducting had some kind. They kind of had empathy. They don't. The difference is they don't feel pain. They don't understand pain. So when they're doing their medical experiments, their medical testing, and the abductees screaming in pain, that confuses them. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I don't like aliens. I really don't. But, I was commenting on this last night. So you've got Greer, who thinks, oh, aliens are wonderful. And you got DeLong, who needs to shoot all the aliens down.
Yeah, shoot them down. Don't invite them. He was like, he takes the stance of Stephen Hawking. Don't send signals out there to announce where we are. Totally two different thoughts.
No. There's no middle ground.
Yep.
Now, there's good aliens, there's bad aliens. And even the good aliens, there's really not much in a way of, they don't, so consider us like kids. And so there's so much information to talk about, not enough time.
No, that's okay. Take your time. That's what we're here for.
I got asked, so 2019's been phenomenal when it comes to UFO reports. Never seen anything like this, to be honest with you. I don't like MUFON. I used to be with MUFON. Mm-hmm. I didn't like the way they treated experiencers. I really didn't. And this was back in the 90s. They like to debunk everything, and I left. The reporting center, so one, Force Moon Paranormal, we take reports. Two, if you want a bigger reporting center, go to Newport, the National UFO Reporting Center with Peter Davenport. That's the only reporting center, in my opinion.
Great guy.
That's the only report. Yeah, oh yeah. And he's the only one that's not sold out to Bigelow. I can guarantee that. That's a fact. Everybody else is sold out to Bigelow. He hasn't.
Because he operates completely independent of MUFON with his New Fork.
Exactly. And he has nothing to gain but taking reports and trying to figure out what's going on. Now, as of this year, there have been entity reports in Oregon through New Fork, where people are actually seeing aliens walking down the road. And that was a New Fork report. So it's interesting that the public are actually, you're actually seeing it come out more. I expected, I don't think disclosure is ever going to happen. I think basically disclosure was attempted back in '52 with the White House UFO flap.
Which happened twice in a week, especially over the White House. You're right. That would have been the perfect time. The Marines that they actually was at General Sanford. The first and only time they came out and publicly said we have craft that sound incredible from credible witnesses, and it's like it sort of fizzled out from there because even that while that was happening in '52. J. Allen Hynek was still debunking stuff for Project Blue Book, but it seemed to me that should have been the time to let people know. But I wonder if the reason is maybe they were still feared of the Orson Welles radio broadcast?
Oh, you know what? That's an interesting story, too, because right here locally. So FMP headquarters, we live in Concrete, Washington. And if you're familiar with the story of Concrete, Washington, when they did the Orson Welles broadcast, and of course it came up as a news broadcast, well, about the time they started talking about an alien invasion, a transformer blew here. And the whole town lost power. This actually hit national news because everyone freaked out because they didn't know it was a radio broadcast. They thought it was a real alien invasion and that it was real news. So they grabbed their guns because there was no radio, there was no telephones. All the power went out. They couldn't reach. They weren't. Nobody could reach them and tell them it's just a news story or it's just a radio broadcast. Until later on, they felt really stupid because it didn't really happen. So yeah, it's an interesting story about here locally where I live. That it hit national news and interesting timing that the power's going to go out right when they start the alien broadcast story. Oh.
Let me ask you about Bigfoot at the same time. You're talking about 2,500 different species. What's your take on Bigfoot? Because it wasn't until John Lear started talking about that Bigfoot was an extraterrestrial, even though John Lear says he's from Mars, and, there's a big debate about that. I personally think that, if we can't find a carcass, and it wasn't until recently that someone told me that after Mount St. Helens that the U.S. military went in and swept up a couple of the carcasses of Bigfoot, but all these decades of, Bigfoot, skunk ape, mountain yeti, and all these other names for it, Sasquatch,
right.
And yet we cannot find it. We could find tracks, we could hear noises, and there's a handful of videos, and most people point to that 67 video as being the only legitimate one because of the way the knees were bent as it was walking. The point being is I would think by now, considering you really can't even commit a crime without being on 10 videos tapes at the same time, even in the forest that, with the availability of GoPro cameras and everything else and night vision, why are we not capturing Bigfoot as often as we can? So I'm starting to think that maybe this thing is interdimensional, aka extraterrestrial, because if it's slipping in and out of dimensions, maybe onto its own planet and not.
Okay, so I'm with you, but there's two things going on, and of course this is if you look at Native American lore, the hairy man was a very magical being that was kind of a guardian of the tribes. I believe he's interdimensional, hands down. Now, what you're seeing today too, though, is people coming out saying he's violent. They're, an aggressive Bigfoot. Prior to a year ago, the only aggressive Bigfoot I would hear was a swamp ape in the south. But I'm sorry if I've got, nothing but a body of hair and it's 120 degrees and humid, 100% humidity, I'd be aggressive too. So there's a race of extraterrestrial called the Oarra, Oarra, and they are Bigfoot. Not the Bigfoot they're Oarra, and they look like Bigfoot, and they do come from off-world. And that comes from our Keith. You really need to have our Keith on the show because he'd astound you.
Yeah, definitely. That's one of your researchers on your team that you were talking about, right?
He actually communicates with 50 races roughly every day.
Wow. Through meditation in that sort of sense, or how?
No. No, you would have to explain it. I can't even explain it. Yeah. So the Oarra is the more aggressive, but what's funny to me is they're more aggressive, but their purpose is to network with humans.
Huh.
If you're here to network with humans, I would think you weren't going to be aggressive.
That's true. If you're here to work with us, you would be kind and friendly, right?
Right, or you just stay to yourself.
Yes.
Which is what Bigfoot does. Now, I've heard cases where the primate sounds were heard, and very much like the movie Predator or the Heat Wave, it was like a digital pattern, and it was a Bigfoot that was basically cloaked. And I think that would happen in Canada. but I do believe they're interdimensional. My first tree knock I heard was about 2014, 13. I was up on the mountain behind the house deer hunting, and I had a couple of buddies with me, and we were walking down a trail. We came upon a tree that was knocked down. We turned around. We were going to go back to the road, a logging road, and we heard the knocks. Now, I'd never researched Bigfoot before. I knew what the tree knocks were. I'd heard about them before, but Bigfoot wasn't my thing. It is now, but I looked at my buddies and I said, you know what? That's what they call tree knocks. That's a Bigfoot. And we turned around. Now, bear in mind, it's about, it's not heavy brush. We can see about 100 feet in front of us, and there's nothing there. We put our packs down. We walked up to where we thought we heard it, and there's a log, probably the one you used to hit the tree, I don't know, but it's all pine needle, so you're not going to see, foot marks. We looked around for about 10 minutes, went back to our pack, put our packs back on, took one step, and he did it again. Like, yeah. He just messing with us.
I gotta say, this cloaking is so more common than people think. I saw this promo for Japanese technology trying to sell to American military. It must be more than 10 years old. And it shows a soldier wearing a suit. And the Japanese have like little pieces of mirrored glass on it. But they have the ability to bend light. So if the soldier is standing still, you can't tell it from the brush around it. And if it's walking, it looks identical to what you see in the Arnold Schwarzenegger
right.
movie.
And DARPA created that.
Yeah.
That's a DARPA. That's a DARPA creation, and it makes you wonder what else they've created. I don't care for DARPA. Or the CIA for that matter.
Clowns in America.
Anyway, yeah. And, so getting off topic just for a second. So my degree is in Homeland Security. And what's interesting, when Homeland Security was created after 9/11, and 9/11 was an inside job, that's not even a conspiracy anymore. That's actually in my textbooks. But when Homeland Security was created, 22 different federal agencies were formed under the umbrella of Homeland Security, but the CIA. Now, some would say, well, that's because the CIA only focuses on international terrorism and, terrorists outside the country. Well, no, not so much true. You got the Department of State. You got a whole lot of other agencies that do that too. But
and
what I don't like about them
is that the CIA can operate within domestic borders as long as it has domestic agency attached. So let's just say it's the DIA or the FBI that attaches themselves onto the CIA for this mission. Then the CIA can roam freely across the streets of America without having to have the repercussions of being an international group only.
Right, and then they have, what I don't like is MK Ultra, the waterboarding. It's a known fact that waterboarding and torture tactics do not give you viable intelligence.
No, because when you're being tortured, you're going to say whatever the hell they want you to say.
Exactly. I had to write a paper on that in one of my courses I was taking on, I can't remember what they call it, but anyway, torture tactics.
Enhanced interrogation, right? Is that what you're trying to say? Because I had a former CIA officer whose whole job was enhanced interrogation. He overran the project for 9 years, which started under Bush W. and ended in the Obama era. 9 years, and he was, I forget the name of the one of the big head honcho terrorists at Gitmo, that he was, literally through sensory deprivation, waterboarding, and all that. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed or something like that, it might have been. I could be wrong about who it was, but the point is I've never been a fan of enhanced interrogation because the intel, they're gonna, if someone's not sleeping for days on end and their mind is already like confused of where the heck they are, and they're just wanting to get this, torture over and done with. They're going to tell you what you want to hear. True or not, that's what they're going to say.
Exactly. Now, let's wrap up Bigfoot. So I do have about a, oh God, I don't know how big. I do have a plaster cast of a Bigfoot track. And it's kind of cool because Markham, our scientist, so we do have two scientists on the team. We have Markham, he's our medical scientist. He's been, or our bioscientist actually. It's nice because we have our own lab that way. Although we are not a evidence-based, we're not here to prove paranormal. We're an emergency response team. That's what we do. But we do have two scientists. We have Markham, he's in North Carolina. And then we have Karen, she's an atmospheric scientist. She used to work for both Boeing and NASA as meteorological scientist. So, and we have Francie, she's our psychiatric therapist. But he came here to the house from North Carolina, and he got to hear his first Bigfoot knock right here at the house. You know, we were walking up the mountain, and it was really interesting because that particular knock had tone to it. It was kind of like a bump, 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 bump. It was, you know, I've never heard anything like that one. But getting to the cloaking real quick. So what's interesting is most cases where you'll have people, they'll put up game cameras.
Yeah, it's ironic you mentioned that because when we were talking about, the different cameras, someone wrote game cameras, and we passed that point, and I was going to pop that up and say it. So, yeah, you hit the head of the nail on the dot, literally. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Well, the interesting with game cameras, though, is so people watch the recording, and they'll see the coyote, they'll see the deer, they'll see the rabbit. All of a sudden, the camera's going to go white.
Huh, weird. Almost as if it's getting an electrical disturbance, like you would say from a craft.
Interdimensional being.
Yeah.
So they most of the time the camera will go white. You'll think maybe it's a technological issue, but then it goes back to normal, and you're going to see the deer and the coyote, but you'll hear the primate noises in the background at this point. So I don't think you're going to get a good picture of a Bigfoot, and there's too much CGI. I'm right there with anybody can make a YouTube video of the most perfect craft or the most perfect Bigfoot, but most of the time it's Photoshop or CGI.
Let me say this too. What I've also learned is that digital cameras, because they are digital in nature, are very easy to be affected by, craft or beings, etc., that are emanating whatever energy they are. Whereas analog cameras that we used to use, were more possibly able to pick something up.
Oh, old school is by hands down the best method. That's why I love watching movies like Conjuring and Annabelle. When I not everything's demon. I'm not with the Warrens on that, but I love those movies because you see the Warrens actually doing old school investigative techniques.
Yeah.
They put the bells on strings. They put the flower out to watch for footprints. They do it old school before we even really had technology so much.
And
but
it's sad that Lorraine Warren just passed away recently.
I know it. We're losing a lot of our old timers. And it makes you wonder who's going to step up and take their place.
Yeah.
I was upset when Jim Mars died.
Yeah,
Jim Mars was great.
Great friend of mine. Unfortunately, I have 5 final interviews ever for people that did an interview, and then within a week, sometimes they would do like an event in person, but their last radio interview was with me. It started with Dr. Roger Lear, who passed away in 2014. The next person was that summer Jesse Marcel Jr. Then Edgar Mitchell, then Jim Mars, and recently Stanton Friedman. And I'm very privileged to have spoken to them before they passed away multiple times, but I was very sad to, plan with them like, okay, hey, we'll do this next time, and then they're just gone.
Right. Now, getting back to cameras, we do have on the team our drone operations specialist, and he's also our mountain specialist. He's also another veteran, and he's got the top of the line drone. He's also FCC certified, so he's legal. And his drone will go high altitude. It has FLIR. It's quiet. And the software we have to analyze things is actually military grade. He was given military grade software access for missing persons cases that we were on.
Interesting.
And it's actually designed, for tracking terrorism, for tracking terrorists in the Middle East and that kind of thing. So when you're looking for a missing person, you're not going to miss them. You see that rock that looks like a person, this particular technology is this particular software is going to identify that. So, when it gets warmer, it's getting warmer now, so we're going to start planning more mountain trips to look for Bigfoot. There's a lot more mysteries in the mountains than just Bigfoot, though. When you're looking at Faye, you're looking at missing 411, for example.
Yeah, David Paulides. Yeah, huge number.
Oh, yeah.
And you know what? Even though he's cataloged 1,600 probably in the last more than half century, this goes back to, American Indians, to ancient Greece. People have been just plucked up.
Right.
Either they walk into another dimension or plucked into a craft above them. Something's going on where these people disappear without a trace.
Yep. Now, my opinion, because he will never give his personal opinion. I've asked him before. And I don't think it's one thing. I really don't. I don't think Bigfoot's taking people. I think, if anything, there might be an alien issue with some of them. I think they're walking through portals with some of them. I think that they're abducted by the government with some of them.
Interesting.
And maybe even other things that we haven't even found yet.
Staying on Bigfoot, here's a question from Lasha Senyak. If Bigfoot is dimensional, what is his purpose for coming here, if you know?
Well, who's to say he isn't from here originally?
True. One of the cryptozoology creatures that we have yet to identify.
Right. And they got the Awara that actually comes from out there somewhere. I can't remember exactly where Keith said they come from. Let me pull up my document real quick, and it might actually tell me. So I've got a couple theories, too, on that. Because I've heard the stories where, you have a landed craft that's been seen. You have a Bigfoot that comes out. They pick up, plant samples, water samples. They get back on the craft, and they leave. But you've heard the opposite end of that spectrum, where UFOs be seen in the sky, and you have Bigfoot running terrified. I'm not sure if you've heard those stories or not. Now, who's to say that if humans are being abducted, that they aren't abducting Bigfoot as well, if it's all about genetic manipulation, genetic research?
Of course, because obviously we have cattle mutilations, we have horse mutilations,
right,
and that's what's returned to us. I mean, who's keeping track about the cattle and the horses and other animals that are not returned to us?
Oh, Linda Moulton Howe is the best one for that. Hands down. When it comes to the animal mutilations, I think some of that's government, though, to be honest with you.
Yeah, especially when it has helicopters instead of a UFO or
right,
TR-3B or whatever we would identify as a UAP, a modern-day extraterrestrial craft or extra-dimensional craft, whatever it be. When you hear a helicopter in silent mode, that's generally a military helicopter that drops cattle and the bones are broken in such a way that it had like a 40-foot drop or 20-foot drop, well then yeah, you could sort of rule out ETs in that case. But they're definitely both. That I agree with you on there. But there's also the cases where it's not U.S. doing, or private corporations, whatever you want to clump it up to, or it's not humans in as a whole. Both.
But you know what? You know what's eerie to me? So you hear about the laser precision organ cutting, the laser precision missing jaws, and then you have things like Dyatlov Pass, where you have the same thing that happens as far as the laser precision missing jaws and eyeballs were missing. And I think
I'm
three
glad
of
you
them.
mentioned that. Somebody brought this up the other day, was asking a guest, not this week, but maybe last week or the week before, and they wanted to know if the guest could explain what happened at the Dyatlov Pass incident. Instead of me saying it, do you mind saying it, Eric?
What I think happened?
Just the scenario of what we know, the facts at least.
So the facts of it, I believe it was 9 university students, and I haven't researched it in a while, but I do believe it was 9 university students that were on their way back, and when they came up missing, when they found them, when they found the bodies, they found the tents were actually ripped from the inside out. Like somebody was so terrified, they ran out of their tent out the side. They found on 2, maybe 3 of them, that the jaws were cut out, the eyeballs were missing. And again, I don't want to give bad
And
facts here.
also, remember that the tents had tears in them, and the people ran
Right.
away in such fear that there were footprints in the ground that showed that they didn't even have time to put on their shoes. They ran
Right,
in
right,
their
right.
underwear and pajamas and barefoot in the freezing snow. So something scared them to hell and was probably attacking them because of the scratches in the tent and from the outside coming in.
And when they looked at the cameras, the last image they got was, I believe, a giant orb and a Bigfoot-looking creature. I don't think Bigfoot did it again, but some of the excuses were an avalanche. No, an avalanche didn't do that. We know that.
Yeah.
And then there was a question, and if I remember right, there were traces of radiation there as well. Do you remember hearing that part?
No, but I'm not surprised.
But some think it was a military exercise gone wrong.
The reason why
And
I questioned about the military is because one of the bodies, even though it was intact, the skin was intact, no tears in it, looked like it had smashed in to a cement truck or something because every bone was shattered in this one body. So that's why, unless the military was really using real advanced weaponry on them or something like that, or something that went wrong with it, but that one body that was intact, no scratches or no rips or no disembowelment, but yet, when the coroner did an autopsy and found that it had literally been not crushed, but almost slammed into something that caused that much damage to its internal organs and bones, is why I've been really, the Dyatlov Pass incident has really been one that to this day has stood the test of time. And as always, the best cases, every time I find an answer, they have way more questions that I'm curious to know about.
right, and that's the way of everything. um, so, yeah, and there's with all mysteries, there's always more questions the more answers you get, and that's with all of them. It really is.
True.
So let me jump into Forest Moon Paranormal real quick. So Forest Moon Paranormal, we started in Iraq. Actually, it started in 2004, again, with our pagan group, because we actually were dealing with paranormal issues there. Obviously, we had the UFO sighting. We had a lot of entity and spirit encounters that we were dealing with. And that was in 2004. So I carried it on at Fort Lewis. In about 2000, I was medically retired at 19 years and 6 months. They screwed me out of retirement, but I got medical retirement. So, yeehaw. Kind of ticked me off, but whatever. It is what it is. So in 2012, we ran a pagan organization called Force Moon Grove, and that was designed solely for supporting pagans in the military because we don't have chaplains. So one of the soldiers that we supported in Iraq joined FMP, and he does Astral. So I was talking to him one day, and this is back in 2012, and I asked him, so if you're Astral and we have a spirit encounter, can you communicate with it, and can you pass it over? And he said, you know what, that's a good question. Let's see. And we tried it on a case, and it worked. So that started the Astral team. And, so we handle 3 or 4 cases a day. So with Astral, your consciousness leaves your body. You can lock on to the location picture. That's how our team does it anyway. Everyone's different. Anyone can Astral. I can't. Not everybody completely can. Some people are blocked. But for the most part, anyone can Astral. So the team can either usually look at a photo of the client, or we get the address, and they can do a Google map search, and they can lock on the location, and they can be there within seconds to minutes, depending where it's at. Astral, there is no distance. There's no. You can go anywhere. So we handle cases globally. Now, being Astral, spirits and other entities don't expect humans to show up in the astral plane. So we have the element of surprise. But we usually go in cloaked as well. It's like shielding your energy. So that if it is demonic, which I want to clarify, demons are extremely rare. True demons are. But signs and symptoms of demonic activity can also be spirits as well. They're all manipulative. They can be. So usually when we come in, spirits, once they understand, I always use the movie The Others as a perfect example of spirits. And I don't want to spoil it, but watch The Others. So oftentimes they don't know they died. So you explain to them that they're scaring the dog and the kids, and sometimes you can basically, I'm trying to think, you can basically set up not a contract, but an agreement between the spirit and the client. You can stay, but stop scaring the kids and the dog. Other times we pass them over. Contrary to popular opinion, spirits don't have to pass over. We don't have to pass them all over. If they're not doing, if they're not bothering humans, and they're just enjoying their life as spirits, leave them alone. They don't have to be passed over. And then, you have the ones that argue about all aliens are demons, or, demons are aliens, or no, they're not. Demons are one race or one species of entity, and aliens are their own, races. And I'm sure you get asked that on the show, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely, a lot.
I think, and I'm going to get hated, but I think religion is a bane for a lot of this.
While we're on demons, let me ask you this. This is from Hadley Scott McIntyre. Do all demons require praise and worship?
No, they don't want praise and worship. They're here, so it depends. So you have lower level demons. These are the ones that are the most common. These are the ones that are making you sick, that are known for attacking. But again, they're rare. Not as rare as the higher level demons. The higher level demons don't attack you. The higher level demons are the ones that make you kill yourself. They don't need to do anything. They're the ones that lower your vibration. They're the ones that manipulate your emotion and cause you to be depressed, cause you to kill yourself. That's how they destroy you. But they're rare. Do you really think they care about humans? Not really.
No.
And we've actually utilized demons in alien cases. And that's going to sound funny and it's going to raise eyebrows, but it is what it is. Because demons and aliens actually hate each other.
Interesting.
And
I've never heard that.
so
Interesting.
Well, we had an alien battle case that we were doing, and so that was probably the craziest case and the craziest night I think we've done. Well, I don't know about that, but the most memorable for sure. Because so we had the red reptilian, one of them, because there's only like two of them I think on the red reptilian side, and they're like the queens. We've never seen the red reptilian before, but she was at this battle. And there were reptilians everywhere, there were grays everywhere, there was an energy race, and there was a slug-like race that all I can describe as from Tremors.
That would freak me out if I saw a slug demon or a slug extraterrestrial. But the further they are from what is known to us or from what we look like, the more scarier anything could be. Real quick, staying on demons here, got a couple more questions for you. Hadley Scott McIntyre wants to know, how do we get rid of them?
Oh, God. Call my team. How do we get rid of them? You don't need you don't. I'm gonna tell you right now. You don't need a preacher. You don't need an exorcism. We remove demons, but really, keep your home cleansed. And I'm looking at the clock here. Keep your home cleansed. So don't use sage. That's another thing that irritates me. Everyone that I'm going to spirit in my house, and everyone says, "Oh, well, get some sage and sage it." No, you don't.
Sage and salt is what I've heard. Yeah.
So no, you're right. Sage and salt's great, but you've got to remove the problem first. Sage and salt will not remove the problem. They will protect the home afterwards, but they will not remove the problem. Sometimes they can. You hear arguments. Oh, it works for me. Well, good for you. Great. I'm glad it worked. But most of the time, it won't. Think of it this way. When you die and you're a spirit, you're the same as when you were alive. So if you were an atheist, for example, and I always use this example, but if you were an atheist, for example, and somebody calls in a Catholic priest, do you really think an atheist spirit is going to listen? If anything, you're going to tick them off even more.
Yeah.
So think of it from that perspective. Let's see. So how do you remove it? Or how do you keep demons away? Keep positive. Negativity draws in negativity. Remember that.
They feed off fear, too. That's another thing I've been told consistently.
So if you have something going on in your home, one, try to analyze it. That's what we do. So we're a combat team, but we don't run in to kill everything. We try to find the root, because not everything needs to be destroyed. One case we had, the client was describing noises she had. They were being scratched. And when we went in, it turns out there was a portal that was open. There was a doorway, and they were trolls. And once we basically got the trolls back to the doorway to their own home, and we closed and sealed the portal, case was done. You don't have to kill everything, but you need to find the root. Is it a spirit? Oftentimes you'll have a malevolent entity that's not demonic that will have souls trapped or spirits trapped. And they're the spirits are terrified, and it's causing more paranormal activity than normal. So once you remove the malevolent entity, the spirits willingly pass over, and then you have everything's cleared out.
Here's a couple more for you, Frankie Zomboy. Are demons Nephilim spirits?
No, they're not.
Okay.
Demons are demons.
Tam Stanley, what is the best way to summon a demon?
I'm not going to tell you that. I really ain't.
Hadley Scott McIntyre, can they converse? I'm assuming with us. I'm not sure with there's no rest of after converse.
You talking spirits or demons?
I'm assuming
Are we still
it's yeah. Everything above it is still demons, so I'm assuming it's about demons.
So we can converse. We utilize our mediums can converse with aliens. For that matter. Once you have that channel open, you can converse with it with whatever you need to converse with when it comes to at the client's home. Things of that nature. But no, and I hate. I do hate guests that give one-line answers like no. But you don't need to conjure something you don't know what's going to do. When people ask that question, it's what's your reasoning, one? And when people conjure what they aren't familiar with or don't know what it's going to do or what its motive is going to be, that causes for our team to clean up. And that's common.
Kai Smith wants to know if you have ever visited the East Eddy Ranch, and if you have, what do you believe is going on there? And that's James Gilliland Ranch, by the way, at Mount Shasta.
Right. Yeah. No, I've never been there. UFOI team with Michael Hall. I know his team was there. They were abducted when they went there. They had a lot of strange experiences. What do I think is there? I think it's really common. I think it's the same as Skinwalker Ranch. I think it's the same as a lot of the hot spots you see on the earth. I think they're just so look at ley lines. If you've seen a map of the ley lines of the earth, I think a lot of high activity areas are where some of the ley lines cross, basically creating an energy center. I think that's some of what's going on there. And I remember one video where Mount Adams, they actually showed a big hangar door that was in the mountain, and they showed this hangar door being opened, and they showed the hangar door being closed. Did you ever see that video?
Of the doorway? Which kind of doorway are you talking about? Like, you mean a spiritual door of them going in and out of? Like a portal?
No, a physical door, like a hangar door.
No, I've not seen it.
Yeah, look that up. It's it's going to be at East Eddy Ranch at Mount Adams hangar door, and it should pop up.
I'll write that down, actually. Mount Adams, you said? Mount Adams hangar door.
Yeah.
Okay. Here, let me ask you another question since we're on this here. Mm-hmm. And I actually have a picture of James Gilliland Ranch. This is just for the background for people who are watching on YouTube, and it's showing a bunch of these orbs, but this question is something different. This is, again, from Hadley Scott McIntyre. He says, I understand I'm not on their level, so I believe we have no place in conjuring. Okay, maybe that's less of a question than it is a comment, but you want to respond?
Yeah, and again, I don't want to appear rude. I really don't. But again, coming from our point of view, where we're an emergency response team, you have to look at what caused the paranormal activity. That's the first thing we look at, and it's part of getting to the root of the problem. Oftentimes, you'll have, and I get asked this question too: are Ouija boards evil? No, they're not. But are you going to give a kid a chainsaw?
No.
It's a tool.
No.
And have to go play with it. No. You've got to train them. You've got to use safety. You have to know what you're doing.
Same thing. You're not going to hand a kid a Glock 22 or something like that,
Exactly. But it's nothing more than a tool of communication. The difference is, because then the question comes up, well, are tarot cards evil? No, they're not. Not at all. So the difference between Ouija boards and tarot cards, for example, though, is the level of vibration. Imagine the Ouija board, if you're not using proper protection with it, shielding, make sure you're grounded, make sure you close the door before you quit.
You mean by saying goodbye, right, on the board?
Exactly. Basically, yeah. Make sure the door's closed. But the Ouija board, anything can come through. You might think you're talking to Uncle Tom, but it might be a demon. You think you're talking to a demon, or a spirit. It might be Fae. You just never.
Eric, now that we were on spirits and Ouija board, remember those two questions that I told you I love to ask everybody who studies ghosts and spirits? I'm going to hit you with those two questions now. One, have you ever come across a ghost or a spirit of a being that spoke a dead language, a dead human language, like ancient Sumerian or ancient Greek or something like that?
No, that one we have not. And again, I hate short answers, but I don't have anything more to say about that one because, no, we haven't. Everything is spoken English.
Well said. And you know what? Like
I'm thinking, though, because I'm trying to remember, because, you're talking 5 cases a day, sometimes 10 cases a day. It depends, for the last 7 years with the Astral team.
Now, here's the next question where I've only got 2 yeses to, and have you ever come across a ghost of an extraterrestrial?
No, that one we have not either. And getting on that real quick. So, because I get asked, okay, well, you guys have killed aliens before. Where's the body? Well, when you're dealing with astral, there is no body. You can't bring a physical body back through the astral. So basically, the body of the alien, the body of the spirit, the body of the entity, usually we send the entities back to where they came from. Spirits, we cross over. Aliens, yes, we have killed aliens. And we used to stop alien abductions. But the safety of the team became jeopardized, and I have to look out for the safety of the team before all.
That's true. And any other human involved, especially if your team is investigating a house full of people. Here, Paper Crane wishes, staying on the Ouija board and ETs in general, wants to know if you can talk to an extraterrestrial through a Ouija board.
You know what? I've never done it with a Ouija board, but I have heard it done through a spirit box.
Interesting. Very interesting. I'm actually going to write that down because I actually have 2 Ouija boards 4 feet away from me right now. But I always take protection when I use them. And unfortunately, I can never really find people who's willing to use them with me. I'm like, come on, I'm not going to go do this darn thing by myself. So that's why I got 2.
Where you at? I'll come over and use it with you.
Northridge. No come anytime you want. We'll do it live on air.
Paracon. Come to Paracon in September. Bring them with you.
Yeah. Here's another question for you that just popped up real quick, and then I'm going to let you continue, of course. Lasha Senyak, are there places where dimensional openings are more common, like mountains or deep lakes?
Good question. I'm thinking here. Not anything specific that I can think of. Certain mountains are more magical, like Mount Shasta. Mountains are always hot spots for UFOs. One thing, especially volcanic, because there are certain craft that use the geothermal energy to fuel their craft. And that's why a lot of times volcanoes are hot spots for UFOs. There are also certain races that can neutralize or keep volcanoes from blowing up or erupting. So those are a couple things with mountains. Mount Shasta, I believe it's not the Pleiadians. I get tired of hearing about the Pleiadians. The Pleiadians can't come here. They can't handle our atmosphere.
So what we're seeing when we see Pleiadians, are we seeing a sort of like their I don't want to say spirits, that's the wrong word. Are we seeing projections, astral projections of them, or what people will report as when they come in contact with them?
Projections, yes, I'd agree with that one. So there's also what's called the Galactic Consortium. Some people, back in the 90s, they called it the Galactic Federation. This is completely different. There's like 1,500 races that make up the consortium. They're not here. They're here to monitor the Earth. Don't get me wrong. but they're not here to manipulate anything. They don't care that Trump's the president. They don't care that, Russia might be acting up. Now, what they will step in is if there is a threat to destroy the Earth. They are here to monitor the Earth, not the humans. They don't care so much about the humans. But if there becomes a nuclear war where there's a threat that's going to annihilate the Earth, that's where they'll step in.
Ah.
And, so what's interesting, too, because we actually did a show on crop circles, and an interesting theory came up with crop circles that I love, is the fact that, so there is certain elements on the Earth that some of these races are here for, certain minerals. And who's to say that some of these crop circles aren't markers for where some of these minerals that they want to mine are?
Well, I do know from Zechariah Sitchin's text that thousands of years ago Earth is full of minerals and other things that I would think are useful for other planets. But it was monatomic gold that the Anunnaki, I believe, wanted to mine from us,
right.
And in fact created us as a slave race to mine it for them.
Okay. And yeah, I heard that discussed last night. So we were not created as a slave race, but we were created by a race as warriors. Think of how violent the human race is from birth. We're not a peaceful race, from the beginning. We really aren't. And we're easily generated. We're easily repaired. The human body is, and the population is easily expanded, and that's why we were created as a warrior race.
Interesting. That's another take that I've actually never heard. And you know what? That would make sense because didn't at one point we revolt, right? And we can only revolt if we're not slaves, if we are in fact warriors.
Right. And I mean, yeah, we're a very, very violent race just from necessity.
True.
So.
Not to mention what's all across the, all across the world. I don't want to say just America because it's not just the United States with the Second Amendment that is a very violent human race. I mean, historically, we hunt for food. We, the earliest humans were found with spears embedded into their skeletons. So, it just goes to show that this is not a modern thing to hunt each other.
No, this starts from the beginning. What was I going to say? I had a thought in my head too. So, where was I going? I hate it when that happens.
Talking about that the aliens created us as warriors.
Right. No, but there's another thought I was going with.
The minerals.
No, you need to get our Keith on, and he can explain all this in a lot more detail than I can.
Okay.
So with Force Moon Paranormal, we started as, going to Astral. So yes, we deal with all aspects of hauntings. We deal with, we've resorted back to the alien abduction side of helping abductees the old school way that we started with. We don't get involved as far as Astral going to deal with the alien side because of the threat. And ironically, the threat doesn't come from the aliens. Aliens are easily removed. The threat comes when you're dealing with MyLab cases. And that's where there's government involvement or human involvement.
You know what? Thank you so much, Eric, for bringing this, because I was just going to say we got about 15 minutes left, and that is something that not very many people have talked about, and I've been looking for someone to talk about MyLab. So if you don't mind, let's talk about MyLabs from now until I tell you it's time for you to plug in, your group and everything else.
So we were called into one MyLab case, and I'm not going to get into details other than our team went in. So FMP headquarters is heavily shielded. We shield more than the normal, but prior to this time, we didn't have. I'm trying to think how to explain it. That sounds not so crazy, but it's kind of like an energy shield. You can't see it, but it keeps. Put it this way: I've had aliens that came around and couldn't see the property. We also, I know, I have Bigfoot that watches over the property as well. So it's heavily protected here. So one of the protocols when the Astral team's going on a mission is they go from wherever they're at, the space here. They go to the site, the client's house. They come back here when they're done. They go back home. That way, if they are being followed by whatever, it comes here, it gets lost, and then they're safe. So that is one of the safety protocols that we have in place. So we were asked to come in, and I've got pictures of my lab case, and they are beyond traumatic. And so basically, the government does use remote. They do use remote viewers. And their remote viewers were able to pick up the Astral team. And, when it comes down to that, no, you can't do that. I'm not going to put the team at risk. And we actually lost team members because they got scared.
Ooh.
And they thought I was being a bad leader because they didn't feel safe. And I'm like, look, we come into new experiences that we don't know about yet. I can only do so much other than establish new protocols for the future, which, we stopped doing it. So we found out, after 17 years that we can't do everything. My lab, abduction is just not something we're going to mess with anymore. When it comes to abduction, and for any of your listeners that are abductees, I always encourage starting a dream journal for one. And you want to put your time, your date, your location, and your weather, because weather does affect your dreams. Whether, if a lightning storm comes in, whatnot. And you want to be as detailed as you can with pictures, whatnot. And you look for patterns. Is something happening at the same time of the month, at the same hour, whatnot. And 3 o'clock is not the witching hour. 3 o'clock is not the magical hour where the spirits come out. Spirits are here all the time. I want to clarify that right now. That's another irritation. So another thing that needs to happen is I'm all for peer support counseling. So when you're talking abductions, when you're talking abductees, there needs to be peer support that's not infiltrated by government for abductees to sit and talk. Because a big healing step is for the abductees to find out they're not alone.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And those who harbor...
They're not the only ones.
Those who harbor those thoughts or those memories, and for a long time, they're tormented by them until they finally realize they're not alone. I've seen this firsthand with the Yvonne Smith's group.
Yeah. And I'm probably a minority, but I don't like hypnotherapy. And I understand if it's done right, it can be healing, and it can be great. But I've also seen the other side of that, where some doors you don't want to open. Some people aren't ready to accept that. Some people aren't ready to see what's happened, or even, the fact that something has happened. And that can lead to suicide.
Yeah.
Or psychiatric issues. I'm more for conscious recall, and that's where the dream journal comes in handy. You start leading them down the path where they start having dreams and they can interpret them and they can understand what they are. And oftentimes they'll find that when they're children, they remember owls, they remember deer. And what's happening there is, and as you know, from studying the the hybrid program, they can't hide their eyes, so they'll basically do a screen mask or a memory mask where kids will see an owl or they'll see a deer, and then as they grow up, they'll find that they're terrified of deer and owls because the reality of what they really were comes back. Screen memory. That's what I was trying to think of.
Yes. Yes.
So
owls are a
screen
lot,
memory.
actually.
Oh yeah. So, and let's discuss real quick. So you have contactees and you have abductees, because that seems to be a confusion to some people as well. Abductees are the ones that are taken against their will, have medical experiments, psychological experiments done to them. Contactees, on the other hand, you will think all aliens are just loving, wonderful creatures, and for their own reasons. Because the contactee is the one that's had a great experience, not a traumatic one. So you'll find, and you have to differentiate between a contactee group and an abductee group, because an abductee goes to a contactee group, they're not going to be so happy, because the contactees are going to fight with the abductees, saying, "Oh, wow, how dare you? How dare you think aliens are evil? They're wonderful."
Do you have you want to take another quick question real quick? This is from
go ahead.
Eric Mills. Eric, have you ever heard of the Nemo or the ancient ones before the Anunnaki?
Those ones, no. That one's new. That's something I can run past Keith. He's actually on standby for questions for me. But I've never heard of that one. That one's new.
It's new to me too. I definitely would love to dive into that. So that's something I'm gonna write down for when you introduce me to Keith, or maybe next time I can have you and Keith on together. Do both of you.
Anytime. He's a regular on our show as well. And yeah, oh God, we get really deep into aliens, and but now our show, we also a new thing I'm doing is doing veterans issues, and it started with Memorial Day. So Memorial Day to me is not a happy time. It's a very somber time, so it gets really irritating when people are, "Oh, look, the pool opened up." Yeah, that's what Memorial Day is about.
It's about
But
remembering
anyway,
those that have fallen in the wars. I mean, I have a lot of friends that didn't come back from the last war post 9/11 in Iraq and Afghanistan. A lot of friends. And the friends that did come back, they're not. They're what used to call World War II shell-shocked, but now we know is termed as PTSD. It's absolutely something that is majorly happening on, when they are killing people. Because, see, these last two wars, a lot of the combatants were not wearing uniforms, so you might think they're civilians, and underneath them they have bombs strapped to them. I mean, I've heard some of the worst stories, but that's just
and that's kids too.
Yes, 15-year-olds and
that
younger.
That really irritates me too. Is when you've got the media that's embedded with troops in a war zone, and all the people see is a soldier shooting a kid. Well, what they don't see is that kid had a grenade or a gun 3 seconds prior. That's happened all the time.
Or, underneath their shirt, a vest full of more than a stick of dynamite, C4, and enough to create literally almost a crater in the ground. That's how big a blast some of these have come out. I mean, I don't want to veer off this topic too much because literally we're out of time. But let me just mention this. I'm sure you heard of this Navy SEAL right now who's being prosecuted for murder because he captured a 15-year-old ISIS soldier who had a vest that was ready to blow up, and he captured him in time to disarm the vest, and interrogating him, the kid died. And now he's put on trial. I mean, wait a second. Well, isn't the whole reason the guy that was the SEAL that is being put on trial was sent there to protect us from things like this? And now it's just a big screw up that I think is a big bureaucratic mess that needs to change. But that case really bothers me because I know This is a very common knowledge. A grenade in a 25-year-old's hand does the same damage as a grenade in a 10-year-old's hand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And yeah, I don't want to deviate from the topic tonight, but we can go on for another hour or two just on combat, and because the whole administration and they were going to pardon war criminals. So I'm thinking the Navy SEAL that you're talking about is a fairly recent case that wasn't going to be pardoned, whereas you do have cases where the staff sergeant, for example, in Afghanistan, that would leave his compound at night, kick doors in, and just randomly assassinate families. That's a war crime.
Yeah, no. This is a current case. The poor guy is still in the brig at, where is it? Where they train here in San Diego, the SEALs, Coronado, and his name is Gallagher.
Okay.
That's his last name, Gallagher. But anyway, I wanted to say though, because we are nearing the end of time, I wanted to give you time to do two things. First of all, if you have one final statement to encompass everything you said, what would you say? And second, now would be a good time to plug in your Astral group and your website and anything else you have.
Okay. So basically, yes, paranormal is everything encompassed. It's UFOs, alien abduction, Bigfoot, alien race interaction, because not all alien race interaction is abduction necessarily. And there's a lot that we don't even know. Our team is learning new things every case we do. If anyone tells you they're an expert, by all means, walk away, because no one knows everything there is to know. We've been doing this for 15 years, and I've been in the field for 20, going on 30 years, and nobody knows everything. So we do this free of charge, and everything's confidential. We don't charge for anything we do, with the exception of Paracon, because we have to pay for our speakers coming and whatnot. So stay away from Paranormal TV as well. Paranormal TV is a bane. It did great things in bringing the paranormal to the public, but then it misled people, and they think Paranormal TV is real. It's entertainment. And that's what I'll leave you with. So you can find Forest Moon Paranormal for issues, and if you want to join the team, actually, go on Facebook and look for Forest Moon Paranormal and join the group. We have an extensive library there. We have, a lot of news goes through there. We do our own UFO reporting, Bigfoot reporting, and we handle any case that comes through on an emergency level.
Well,
S4.
Go ahead. Go on. No. Go ahead. Finish. I want to let you finish up because I was going to start thanking you and the other people I thank.
Okay. So S4 is the voice of Forest Moon Paranormal. We go live every Saturday night, 11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We have a panel that we have on every show. So we have different aspects of the team on every show, whether it's our scientist or our psychiatrist or we have the extended care team, which comes in after the astral's done, and they're the education of the client. They teach them how to clear their home, how to keep their home safe, how to take their life back. They teach them grounding and shielding. We have our media analyst, who he's actually been to school, got a college degree just on looking for CGI, looking for Photoshop and whatnot. So S4, we talk about everything under the sun when it comes to the dark side of the paranormal, whether it's UFOs. We talk about UFOs and aliens a lot. We also, like I said, are just starting our veterans show. Probably every 3 months we'll throw in a veterans show where a lot of my veteran buddies will come on. We also do a lot of disaster response and preparation seasonally on the show. So you can find more information on that at www.s-4radio.com. Then we have our Paracon. Our Paracon is every September 28th, and I'm not going to take time to go into the speaker lineup. You can find information on our Paracon. We also have a ghost walk we'll be doing at Paracon. You can find out information on that at www.fmparacon.com. Think Forest Moon Paracon. So it's fmparacon.com. And with that, That's it.
Well said. Well, let me give some shout outs. First of all, I want to thank Joe Montaldo, the station owner of UPRN 107.7 FM. Also, JC over in UK for running Deprogrammed Radio. My social media manager, Pam Vrettenberg. And check out our website, unitedtruthseekers.com. Also, folks, remember, it is a proven fact that generosity makes you a happier person. So please be sure to hit the subscribe button, follow me on Instagram and Twitter, and hit the thumbs up. Also, go to Patreon. We could definitely use more if you want to continue to support the show. Don't forget about the subscriptions to the archives, where you can listen to the archives of the shows without having to deal with the YouTube ads. I definitely want to plug that in for all of you folks. And remember, the only thing you have to remember, folks, is the name of the show. I make it as simple as possible. Every single username and every single social media account, from Minds, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Flickr, Tumblr, Patreon, YouTube, is all at DRJ Radio Live, just as the website, Dr. J Radio Live. With that being said, I want to thank my guest, Mr. Eric Cooper. Thank you again for joining us. Time really flew by. And I want to thank all the fine, yeah, it did. And I want to thank all the fine people in the chat room for the amazing questions and comments. You guys are always on top of paying attention to the show, and even the comments that I see between you guys of what you're saying about what is being said. I pay attention to that as much as I do to the questions that you're writing for our guests. So I want to thank you all. With that being said, officially, I'm going to sign off. I'll be back Thursday night, so there won't be a show tomorrow. And now I'm signing